This research project was started to see if universal design really delivers on its promise to make sure everything is easier to use and works just as well for everyone. To do this, the researchers looked at several fast food restaurants. The research had just finished its first study on an office building that is generally acknowledged as a good early example of universal design. In that study, the results suggested that universal design really does deliver on those promises. So why did the project decide to take a look at fast food restaurants for its next study? The goal of the second study was to continue testing the 3 predictions about universal design. First, that everyone will perceive a universally designed building to be easier to use than most other buildings they've experienced. Second, that compared to people without impairments, those with impairments will consider most other buildings they have experienced to be more difficult to use than a universally designed one. And third, that a universally designed building will be as easy to use by people with impairments as it is by those without impairments. The decision to examine restaurants was also to answer a few additional questions that the earlier study raised. First, there was the building itself. Designed with attributes obviously intended to make the building's features easier to use for everyone, participants could have been inclined to be overly positive in their ratings of everything about the building. To answer this question, the second study looked at 4 buildings that weren't so uniformly good or bad. Each of the 4 restaurants had some features that were universally designed, some that were merely in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, commonly referred to as the ADA, and some that were neither universally designed nor ADA compliant. Features that are ADA compliant are specifically designed to ensure that they are usable by people with disabilities. Features that are not ADA compliant have designs that fail to accommodate the special needs of people with disabilities. And features that are universally designed are designed to make sure that they are easy to use and work just as well for everyone. Each of the 4 restaurants studied was, in effect, a mixed bag of all these types of features. In this study, the researchers created 3 virtual buildings composed of design features from each of the 4 real restaurants. These 3 virtual buildings were put together using different combinations of inaccessible features, accessible features, and universally designed features that existed in the 4 real restaurants. The other issue raised by the office building study involved its use of guided tours instead of allowing individuals to use the building on their own. To help make the experiences even more realistic for the research participants, the restaurant study didn't have guided tours. Instead, each person was asked at the start to perform several activities typically done at restaurants. The person would then go into the building, perform those activities in whatever order they liked, in their own manner and at their own pace. The research team followed to videotape the experience. Unlike the office building study, where the camcorders were visible to everyone, the restaurant study used hidden cameras to record their participants. There was a hole cut in a bag so that the camera could capture footage but still be inconspicuous to the public. They wanted to avoid any disruption of normal operations and other customers at each restaurant, and with the cameras concealed, there was no reason for employees or anyone else to give special treatment to the research participants. This study also expanded its scope to look at a wider variety of people. The study recruited 112 people to participate. There were 32 adults without impairments, 32 adults pushing strollers, 32 people less experienced with mobility impairments, 16 using knee braces, 16 using wheelchairs, and 16 participants that were more experienced users of wheelchairs. In this study, there were 9 activities that each participant was asked to perform, all of which were typical for a restaurant. The 9 activities included getting to the building from the parking lot, entering the building, purchasing a meal, and obtaining something from a self-serve setup, such as condiments or napkins. In addition, each person was asked to move through the seating area, use the seating area, and enter a restroom. The final two activities were exiting the building and getting back to the parking lot. After the person finished inside the restaurant and returned to the parking lot, the research team asked them a series of questions, just like in the earlier study, about how easy or difficult the activities were and whether they thought that was acceptable or not. They also asked about other restaurants they had experienced in order to get a point of comparison. Just as in the office building study, the videotapes were later used to analyze each person's behavior as they performed each of the 9 activities. The study again used 2 sets of rating scales called the Environmental Utility Measure and the Functional Performance Measure to assign numerical scores to each person's comments and observed behavior respectively. The information that these 2 measures provided showed that the universally designed features were easier to use for everyone than the accessible features. The universal features were so easily used, in fact, that none of the groups had to use more than minimum effort and hardly ever needed any help from someone else when using them. Only a few comments from the interviews reflected any problems at all for the universally designed features. They were mostly due to long distances because of the large parking lots and the space allotted at the cashier counters. Additionally, the information also showed that the accessible features were easier to use than the inaccessible features, as expected. The results of the study also showed that adults without impairments didn't have any problems in any of the 3 virtual buildings, but adults with children in strollers did experience a few problems using certain accessible and inaccessible building features. The people with mobility impairments, whether inexperienced or experienced, had significant problems with the inaccessible building features, as well as some trouble with the accessible ones. A third point that the research showed was that the participants who were more experienced and therefore adept with their wheelchairs were much less tolerant of the design features that were difficult to use than those who were less experienced. But one has to wonder, since the paid participants knew they were being filmed, couldn't that have affected their comments and behaviors while using each of the restaurant's design features? These questions about the possible effects of having paid and knowledgeable subjects led the project into its next study, a tourist destination, Las Vegas, Nevada.